There is a particular kind of love that never announces itself. It does not arrive with grand gestures or carefully chosen words or the kind of moment that both people recognize simultaneously as significant. It arrives quietly, without permission, without a plan, and it takes up residence in a person the way a long-term tenant takes up residence in a building, and gradually, completely, until it becomes so much a part of the structure that neither the tenant nor the building can quite remember what the arrangement looked like before it began. Nathan Briggs had been in love with Claire Weston for 4 years, 3 months and approximately 11 days before he told anyone, and the person he told was not Claire. It was his dog. The dog's name was Biscuit, a beagle of advancing years and considerable personal dignity who had heard many things over the course of his life with Nathan and had responded to all of them with the same measured, non-judgmental attention that made him, in Nathan's estimation, the superior conversationalist in most rooms. Nathan had told Biscuit on a Wednesday evening in October, sitting on the floor of his apartment in Portland, Oregon, with his back against the couch and Biscuit's warm weight across his legs, looking at the ceiling, in the way a man looks at the ceiling when he has finally admitted something to himself that he has been not admitting for a very long time. He had said, "I'm in love with Claire." Biscuit had looked at him with those brown eyes that carried the particular wisdom of creatures who have no use for pretense. "I know," Nathan had said as if Biscuit had responded. "I know." He had met Claire Weston 4 years and 3 months before that Wednesday evening, at a mutual friend's apartment on a rainy November night, in the kind of gathering that happens in your late 20s, not quite a party, not quite a dinner, somewhere in the ambiguous social middle, where people stand in kitchens with wine glasses and talk about things that are more honest than they would be in a more formal setting. Claire had been in the corner of that kitchen talking to someone Nathan didn't know, and he had noticed her the way you notice certain people, not because she was the most visually striking person in the room, though she was striking, but because of something in the quality of her attention. She was listening to whoever she was talking to with her whole face, completely present, the kind of listener that makes the person being listened to feel like what they are saying is the most interesting thing currently being said anywhere. He had wanted immediately and specifically to be the person she was listening to. He had introduced himself later in the evening, when the gathering had loosened and rearranged. Itself and Claire had moved to the living room. They had talked for 2 hours, about a range of things he could still mostly reconstruct from memory in a book they had both read, a hiking trail outside the city, the specific way Portland changed in November, something funny and sad about the nature of ambition that she had said, and that he had not forgotten and had thought about more than was probably reasonable. By the end of the evening they had exchanged numbers, which was Nathan's doing, though he had done it casually enough that it had felt mutual. Claire had texted the next day, not because she was in love with him, because she was the kind of person who followed through on things, who meant what she said, who had suggested they get coffee without any subtext whatsoever, and was now, the very next morning, suggesting coffee with the same absence of subtext. And this, Nathan would later identify, was where it had begun. Not with his feelings, which had arrived that first evening and simply never left, but with the dynamic, the particular, pleasant, genuinely warm dynamic of two people who became, over the following weeks and months, real friends. The kind of friends who text each other things they see that remind them of the other person, the kind who call when something goes wrong, the kind who show up to help someone move apartments on a Saturday morning without being asked twice, the kind who become so fluent in each other's company that the friendship starts to feel like weather, present, surrounding, something you move through without thinking about. Nathan moved through it thinking about it constantly. The problem, if problem is even the right word for something that was also, in its way, the best part of his daily life, was that Claire genuinely did not know. He was certain of this in the way you can be certain of something when you know a person well enough to read the unmanaged version of their face. Claire looked at him the way she looked at her closest friends, with warmth and ease and the specific comfort of someone who trusts completely and has never had reason to consider whether that trust might be operating on unequal terms. She told him about the men she dated. This was perhaps the most instructive data point. She told him about them the way you tell things to a close friend, with full honesty, with the details, with the analysis. There had been a man named Jason who had been charming for 3 months and then revealed himself to be charming only in the specific context that benefited him, which was something Claire had identified with her. Characteristic, precision, and resolved, without drama. There had been someone else whose name Nathan had worked hard to retain as merely a name rather than a symbol of everything currently inconvenient. About his emotional situation, there had been several others, each recounted to Nathan in the full, unself-conscious detail of someone who was entirely unaware that they were describing their romantic life to a person who was quietly, privately, completely in love with them. Nathan had listened to all of it. He had offered the kind of honest, genuinely useful perspective that you can only offer when you actually know someone well, and which was made more honest, not less, by the fact that his own feelings were not on the table. He had said true things. He had given good advice. He had, on more than one occasion, helped Claire see something about herself or a situation that she had been too close to see clearly. She had told him more than once that he was the best friend she had. He had said thank you. He had meant it, and it had also cost him something each time. The particular cost of receiving a true thing that is also not the true thing you were hoping for. Year 3 had been the hardest. Claire had met someone, a man named Marcus, a landscape architect from Seattle who was, by Nathan's reluctant, honest assessment, a genuinely good person. Kind, interesting, present in the way that mattered. Claire had been happy in a way Nathan recognized as real because he knew what her real happiness looked like, which was both the gift and the particular difficulty of knowing someone as well as he knew her. He had been glad for her authentically and at some cost. The way you can be glad for someone while also carrying something heavy about the same situation. Marcus had lasted 8 months. It had ended not because of any failure of character on either side, but because of geography. Marcus's firm had offered him something in Seattle that was too significant to turn down. And Claire's life was in Portland in ways that were not movable, and long distance had been attempted and had not held. Claire had been sad about it in the way you are sad when something real ends. Not devastated, not broken, but genuinely sorry that something good could not be made to work. Nathan had sat with her through that. He had brought food to her apartment on the worst evening, and they had watched something neither of them paid attention to, and he had let her talk about it as long as she needed to. And at the end of the evening, when she had said, "You always know exactly what I need," he had driven home and sat on the floor with Biscuit and felt the full complicated weight of a life spent being exactly right for someone who did not know it. The Wednesday in October, 3 months after Marcus had moved to Seattle, was when Nathan had finally said it out loud to Biscuit, which was not nothing. Biscuit was a reliable confessor, but was also not the conversation that needed to happen. That conversation happened because of Nathan's friend Garrett. Garrett was the mutual friend from the kitchen where Nathan and Claire had met 4 years before, and he was also the only person who knew, and he knew because he had simply watched the two of them at a group dinner 6 months earlier and pulled Nathan aside afterward and said, with the directness that was Garrett's primary social characteristic, "You need to tell her." Nathan had said he didn't know what Garrett was talking about. Garrett had looked at him with the expression of a man who has known you long enough to not bother with that kind of response. They had had the real conversation. Nathan had said what he had always said to himself, that the friendship was too important, that the risk was too high, that Claire did not see him that way, and introducing this information would only make things awkward and change something that worked. Garrett had listened to all of this and then said, 4 years, Nathan. You've been her best friend for 4 years, and you've given her the best of yourself and kept the most important part back. That's not protecting the friendship. That's just deciding for her. Nathan had driven home and sat with Biscuit and looked at the ceiling. He told Claire on a Saturday afternoon in November. They were walking, their usual trail outside the city, One they had walked probably 40 times, in all seasons and many states of weather and feeling. It was cold and the trail was mostly empty and the trees had lost most of their leaves and the sky was the particular flat gray of Pacific Northwest November that Nathan had always found, despite everything, beautiful in a quiet way. He did not rehearse it. He had learned from 4 years of carrying something unrehearsed that the rehearsed version was never the real version anyway. He said, I need to tell you something, and I need you to know that your answer doesn't change anything, because you are one of the most important people in my life, and that is true regardless of what you say next. Claire looked at him. He told her, not everything, not the 4 years cataloged in detail, not every Tuesday morning text or Thursday phone call or Saturday with biscuit that had been colored by the feeling he was describing, just the truth of it, clearly and without performance, that he had been in love with her, that he understood if she didn't feel the same way, that he meant what he had said about it not changing anything. She was quiet for a long time. They kept walking. The trail went through a section of bare-branched trees and the flat gray sky was visible through them in pieces. Then she stopped walking. She turned to look at him with an expression he had never seen on her face before, not surprise exactly, but something more complicated than surprise. Something that looked like a person rearranging a room they thought they knew the layout of, finding that the furniture had always been in a different configuration than they had understood, that the room made more sense this way, that there were things that now explained themselves. She said, Nathan. How long? He told her. She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were wet, which was not what he had been expecting, and he did not know yet what the tears meant, which was the longest not knowing of his life, which had contained a significant amount of not knowing. She said, I think I have been very stupid. He said, you haven't. She said, I think I have been very unobservant for someone who prides herself on observation. He started to say something, but she kept going. She said, I think that I have been telling you about every person I have dated for 4 years, and I think that every time I did that, some part of me was checking your face. And I think I told myself I was looking for the reaction of a friend, and I think I was wrong about what I was looking for. Nathan stood on the trail in the November gray and did not say anything. Claire looked at him the way she had looked at the person in the kitchen 4 years ago, with her whole face, completely present, fully arrived. She said, I think I would like to try. They stood on the trail for a moment, in the cold November air among the bare-branched trees, while Nathan understood what had just happened and felt it settle into him the way things settle, when they are true, not with noise, not with drama, but with the quiet solidity of something finding its right place after a long time in transit. He reached out and took her hand. She led him. They walked back on the same trail they had walked 40 times before, in the same gray November light, and everything about it was identical to every other time and completely, permanently, entirely different. Biscuit greeted them both at the door that evening when Nathan had suggested, for the first time with new implications, that Claire come over for dinner. He looked at them together. He looked at Nathan. He seemed, in the dignified and knowing way of beagles, entirely unsurprised. Some things take 4 years to arrive. That does not make them late. It makes them exactly on time.